public cloud is true, AWS is true, Azure is true, your existing IT is true. All those things are going to stay, they're going to be with us, so what do we do in that world? Now, when we talk about buzzwords, we have digital transformation, cloud transformation, you name it, everything as a service, whatever it is. I find it very interesting to talk to people about, yeah, but what do you actually want to get out of it? Rather than just going cloud first. Right, why? What do you want to do? What are you trying to do? And we have these concepts like digital transformation and innovation. Now, in IT terms, I think we can track what innovation means from an IT capability. And when we look at it in IT terms, it's really about this little triangle and how fast you can go around this. So the idea is you have an application. You create an application. That application generates some data. That data might be within the app. It might be the application data itself, or it might be data that gets created because the app exists. I now know something I didn't know before because that app is running. And then we need to analyze that data, and we need to say, okay, because of what I now understand, I'm going to iterate my application, do a new one or something like that to take advantage. And that is actually what happens for innovation from an IT perspective. Now, historically, in the traditional delivery model, what we've tended to do is outsource that. And we've done it on a multi-year cycle. Right? So if you're waiting for the vendor to release some new features and go, oh, what have they released? What shall I have a look at? That's about a 2-year cycle by the time they release some new features and you consider. So you've completely outsourced the application thing when you just buy a product. If it's, where does IT play in terms of this analysis? Traditionally, we get in the way. It's a hard thing to admit. It's been for very good reasons, because we've had a lot of challenges as IT has grown up. But we get in the way of this triangle. ITIL, change control, all that kind of thing. No, you can't do that. I'm going to control it first before I do what you want to do as an IT user. We get in the way of this cycle. Right, so modern cloud transformation is really about saying, how do I go around this really, really fast? How can IT get out of the way of the bit? Where should the analysis take place? The analysis should take place by users of IT. It should be people in the university who have ideas how to improve the university through IT capability. What should IT be doing? Supporting the availability and the iterative capability of the application landscape. Right? And we often go, oh, well, that's cloud. Right? For me, that is what cloud is. Cloud is when you can do a delivery model that supports going around this cycle. And this putting that analysis in the hands of people in the university, non-IT people, to say, well, this is what I want to try. That's why we came up with these terms like align to the business. IT must align to the business. And, well, that's right. But I think that's still a cop-out. Because align to the business is very intangible still. In the university, which of you are the business of the university, and which of you are IT of the university? And how do you define? It's a bit of a cop-out just to get this label. Because then what you tend to do is you just do things by yourself and say, oh, I've done what I think that person needs. The much, much better approach, if you really want to do cloud transformation, is to align to the user. There is somebody who is looking at why students leave the university. And you've got your projects around. I'm going to analyze the data and say, well, if they're not visiting the library this much and all the rest of it, they're going to, we see that they go. That's great intelligence to have. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. Maybe you don't know if your job's IT. But somebody's got some ideas and they want to run some projects. What more about if we gave them a really good social application on their mobile phone so they feel happier? What about if we tried this? And what about if we tried... Now we're talking innovation. Can you take those ideas, stand them all up, see which ones work, see which ones don't work, and not have a terrible cost of failure if they don't work? Right, that's kind of the innovation cycle that we see. Now that idea, that concept, there's a lot of commonality around CIO deliverables in the world today. And I kind of break them down into 3 things, right? That concept of all the cool stuff we need to do easily gets put to the bottom of the priority pile for the reasons we talked about earlier, the 90% of your day job, right? So if we think about those other things we need to do, I've seen cost reductions, ambitious targets, not necessarily deliverables, 30% over 2 years. That's pretty big. If you're lucky, that's a 30% growth with the same amount of spend. For some people, it's hard reductions. That's not license renewal. That's not shaving a bit here and there. That's data center closures. That's refactoring your resources. This is big ticket items to do in 2 years. We talk about risk and resilience. When I started, the servers were going down 4 times a week, and I could turn over, reboot them, and people would say, "Hey, thanks, Rick," and that was that. Not anymore. We just talked about how IT is essential to business operation. You can't have those failures anymore. And for a few years, we've existed on pretending we've got disaster recovery. As long as we're all terrible, that's okay. We've all got it. But it's not true anymore. You can get really good audit-level reporting on your disaster recovery capability, and you can do it cheaply. So not having it isn't good enough anymore, especially with the importance. Privacy and compliance. GDPR is going to come along and kick us where it hurts pretty quickly. Are we ready? What do we do? What do we need to change? Whatever it is we do, I'll tell you what, it's going to change again shortly afterwards, and again, and again, and again. We've got Brexit, we've got all these other things, right? The landscape and the pressure on us to be compliant with our students' privacy, etc., is pretty intense. And cyber security, universities have a special position here as well. So every organization is faced with, the attack surface that we now have in a complex environment. And hackers have the power of one. They fire 1,000 bullets. You need to stop all 1,000. They need one to get through, and you're compromised. Right, that's a difficult job. That's a difficult job to protect against. That's what happens with ATMs. ATMs have a big wall in front of them, right? And hackers can't get through that. They're very well protected. But they can come through a side gate that's less well protected, and they just hop around inside your network. Right? And in universities, you need to encourage freedom for your students. They expect freedom to be able to do pretty powerful things. So you have kind of quite bold activity taking place inside your network, right? So what do we do about that? You can't just do that by putting a wall at the edge, right? And nobody builds walls anymore. Well, some people in the world like to build walls. It's all right, we'll make the hackers pay. So it's easy to see how this falls to the bottom of the list. But actually, or maybe give it to a little group to do some kind of small siloed activity. But the reality is, cloud transformation is about tackling all these, realizing this is all the same problem. Solving our traditional delivery model is all what this is about. If you solve your traditional delivery model and you focus on what you need to do, that's when you start delivering. And it's a big mistake. It's a big mistake. You ever heard this term? It's not about the tech anymore. It's about the business outcomes or whatever, right? Well, how come we spend so much time talking about perfecting our container strategy and having the perfect microservices model through our application? Why do we spend so much time doing that? That doesn't make sense to me. IT has become more religious than back in the days of Microsoft and Novell. And people are telling us what pure IT should look like. That makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to me because if you just think about it, this is a very simplistic version of a business model. Right? It's just something I threw together. But we understand it, and it maps to universities. You've got supply chain considerations, value chains. You have what you're taking to market and your customer satisfaction, etc. Now, we talked about innovation must be in the hands of the users, right? They're the ones that come up with the ideas. So we need to be focusing on helping those people. If everything we just said was true, we need to be focusing on helping those people to deliver these things, these big things. Look what platforms are. Who cares? As long as you're not going down a dead-end street, you need to take your capability, add to it, evolve it, so that you can deliver big things up here. It's really that simple. Don't be beholden to what somebody else is telling you is the perfect way of doing things or the ideal IT architecture. Who cares? And every journey really does begin with where you start, right? So if you look at, everyone's got the same IT landscape, right? 30% of your estate is physical, and this box is really important. It's big racks full of black box network equipment, and we say, rightly or wrongly, if it goes through that, it's secure. Okay? And you've got a big virtual estate, and you have data centers. Some of them you might not even call them data centers, right? But they are data centers, and that environment is recreated everywhere. And then we've got the rise of services in AWS, which are doing great stuff. I get fantastic feedback from customers about AWS, right? For the new applications and stuff they're writing in there. Ditto Azure. VMware does Office 365. So these are good things, but we have challenges in trying to bring those worlds together. Now, the early school of thought, and a lot of what people will tell you now, is that the idea is, it's okay, do this whole, two modes, two-speed IT thing. Leave that alone. Everything's going to move over there. Go as fast as you can, right? So when I've been talking about this for the last few years, and I've been talking to again, organizations around the world, there's a bit of a time wave that goes. So the US goes first, the UK is about 2 years later, and mainland Europe is about 2 years later after that. And it's really interesting because I have the same conversations in those different time frames. So in the UK 2 years ago, when I was talking to kind of our customers that are really going for cloud, and I said, what percentage of applications are going to be in this world versus this world in 2 years' time? It was 50-50. Those same organizations, the one that have been trying this, actually doing it, are now telling me it's 90-10. Now that doesn't remove the value of these things, right? But what it tells us is if we want to deliver things in the next 2 years, if we want to make a big difference, we need to get away from saying we can just move workloads into these new clouds without any effort. No, you can't. No, you can't. The reason is because if you're doing stuff on some of the new things, PaaS platforms, Office 365, you can move them around wherever those things run. But your existing application landscape is totally dependent on your infrastructure capability. On the VMware, on your networking, on all those other things that you do at the infrastructure level, they are totally dependent on it. You cannot just rip out and replace to a completely different infrastructure capability. You can't move it. I can wrap it in a container and shift it to another cloud. No, you can't. You cannot get away from it. I've seen people trying this for years. You cannot get away from it. If you want to put something to one of these other clouds, make sure it's got benefit for the effort of doing it and re-architect your application. That works, and you can get great benefit out of doing that. You're not just going to copy-paste your applications into the cloud environment. So this is why what we see, people who are really getting the cloud transformation journey right, focus on kind of 4 key principles. The first thing is we need to get the 90% delivering. It's got to be part of the solution, not the part of the problem. Right? We have to get that delivering on the new modern cloud delivery. We need to update our security models, and we need to extend that to take into account the fact that we are in a multi-cloud world. We want to use these services, so we need to extend our security models to say, hey, we embrace them. And we need to embrace them in other ways as well. If somebody says, my best way, my fastest way of producing a great business outcome here is by having this particular service capability in AWS, we want to say, go right ahead, I'm good with that. We don't want to say, oh, really? I don't like that. I've got a project to look at. We want to go on. Let's do it. We want to say, my cloud foundational architecture, I can support you doing that. That's okay. We want to say yes. And finally, for our students and capabilities, there used to be a big intractable conflict between the need of IT to exert control over the way people access IT services and the need for those people to say, I want to be free. I want to use any tablet I want. I want to be able to do this. I don't want to have to put in 10,000 passcodes every time I want to access that kind of file. Right? There used to be an intractable conflict, and it's not anymore. So we need to modernize the way we manage our security and grant flexibility to those users. Now, I did say it was a wave that goes across the world. So the great thing about being in that middle ground is you're not last, and there's a whole lot of learning that you can take from, because other people have been doing everything you're facing for some time now, and you can just leap ahead and try and take advantage of some of that experience. And that's why I'm really thrilled that Mark Silas agreed to come over. He's been, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology is a fantastic organization. They push the boundaries, and they've been tackling this problem for some time. So Mark was really keen to come over and share very agnostically the things they tried and to try and run through that journey story. So Mark, thanks very much for coming here. So lovely picture. So perhaps first of all,
good weather day.
So perhaps first of all, you could just introduce yourself and give your own view of MIT.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having us today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Spent some time living over here. I don't know, it seems like longer and longer ago, but it's always been like a second home to me, so it's a pleasure to be back with everybody. Just to give you a context for MIT, the weather doesn't always look as good as this picture. They found one of our best days. Right around about now, it's probably snowing or about to snow or something like that. But we have a pretty dynamic environment, and we have about 10,000 students and 10,000 faculty. And I'd like to think that we're one of the world's preeminent research and education and technology institutions.
And that must be a problem, right? Because for you, so you're responsible for IT,
Yeah.
your university's the Institute of Technology. I bet you get set some high expectations.
Yes, we have very high expectations. I think one of the things people say as well, the IT is actually in the name of MIT, so you guys better get this right. Needless to say, you know, we have a pretty demanding user community. We like to think some of the best and brightest minds in technology, both now and in the future. And it can create a pretty challenging environment from a security perspective and everything else. But expectations are pretty high for our students and our faculty. It's incredible.
Excellent, thank you. So that all sounds great. So has IT been running perfectly, or you know, what challenges
What time
are you
is it?
facing? Yeah, exactly. So maybe you can talk a bit, you know, put that into some perspective now, because obviously the pressure to update your services, your cloud capability. What were some of the problems? Maybe you could talk through some of the difficulties that you experienced, you know, that caused you to start looking at your transformation requirements.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on it earlier. I mean, I think, you know, at MIT, you'd probably think we spend 50% of our time in the IT department doing innovation. No, I mean, our challenges aren't any better or different than anybody else's. We probably spend 80+% of our time just keeping things running, keeping the trains running on time, keeping the lights on, however you want to call it. And that takes up a tremendous amount of the resources we have in the IT department. So one of our goals is really, how do we do that better? How do we be more flexible? How do we be more agile, responding to, very honestly, a very diverse community in terms of the things they're asking from us? And so for us, that's been a big focus over the last couple of years, is how can we get off the proverbial hamster wheel and kind of change up the paradigm in terms of how we're delivering things. Comes along the cloud, which is, you know, nice, and really has hit a level of maturity where some of the things we can potentially divest ourselves of. We can look at doing those things differently. And so the last couple of years have been pretty exciting in terms of it presents us some real opportunities to change how we deliver our services to our community, and presents us the opportunity to really take resources and perhaps, you know, you had the lovely stack diagram earlier, focus on problems and challenges a little bit further up the stack.
And in terms of those, so you know, we have a list of pain points. I'm sure it'll be familiar to everyone. You know, was there one kind of compelling event that made you start exploring services like Amazon, etc., or was it just the general collection saying something's got to change? You know, where were you at?
I think we've seen a lot of adoption of, you know, greenfield opportunities, I'll call them, where people are building things kind of from scratch. New applications, new kinds of platforms. You know, our community is always developing some very exciting things. And I think they did a lot of that work on some of the new public cloud platforms you'll kind of see out there. And one of the next logical questions becomes, well, why aren't you doing that?
Right.
And it seems pretty simple. You know, it's a cloud, you got a cloud. You know, let's kind of explore those things. I think everyone in this room probably understands from a technology perspective, it's not that easy, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of complexity behind the scenes. There's some very fundamental differences between the way we do what I'll call enterprise IT and the way some of the public cloud native IT you see in a Netflix and things like that.
So it's a good, I mean, it's a good analogy, isn't it? So you have your students doing these amazing things, and you say, well, that was awesome. You had a great outcome. It was really, really fast. And it goes back to the point I talked earlier. Why can't we just get all of our stuff over into that? So I presume your first exercises were really exploring those possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, one thing about MIT is we're a land of engineers and scientists. Yeah. The scientists come up with the theories, and the engineers come up with the realities and the practice. So we try to test the theory about, can we just pick something up and move it from A to B? And how hard is that? On paper, it looks pretty simple. I think the reality we found is it's not that easy. And I'd say some of our early efforts were really eye-opening. It was kind of a bit of a surprise. One thing we just didn't realize or probably have an appreciation for, but we do now, is the public cloud itself is a fundamentally different paradigm than the IT environments we have operated, you know, whether we call them private clouds or virtualized environments. There may be computation, there may be storage, there may be networking, and those similarities in terms of elements, but they're fundamentally different paradigms.
Yeah.
And I say that from the standpoint of, if you have an application that was built from the ground up to be cloud native, to scale on demand and spin up infrastructure, to expand the capacity as necessary, and most importantly to scale down when not necessary, that's the real power you have in terms of the opportunity of these hyperscale public clouds. Unfortunately for us, our environments, the way we built them for a lot of our enterprise IT platforms, they weren't built to be dynamic. And we leveraged tremendous benefits from virtualization in terms of time to deployment, time to adding capacity. But we went from months and weeks to maybe 10 minutes, 5 minutes, things like that. But they're not something that happens automatically. Our platforms aren't built like that. Your ERP system probably doesn't add 10 more web servers automatically when tax season comes along and you have a busy day. There's a lot of work that still goes behind the scenes. Orchestration has made us a lot quicker, but at the same time, it's not able to really take advantages of what the public cloud has to offer. So for us, we moved some of those workloads over. I can tell you, when we got our first AWS bill, it was an eye-opening experience, not just for the IT people, but probably more importantly for the financial people, which I think all of us in the IT industry know and love. And they're sitting there like, you got to be kidding me. And it's an eye-opening experience because logically, it would seem that the scale that they're doing things in the public cloud, this should be an easy transition where things just run more effectively, cheaper, hopefully. And that's not quite the case.
So, I mean, would you say it's fair that your explorations with cloud showed that there are ways you can absolutely recognize cost efficiencies, but actually the move to cloud should be considered a value proposition. It should be, do I need the value out of these capabilities, and what's my best way of getting those values? Yeah,
you really have to look at your portfolio and really decide what makes sense. I think there's a variety of dynamics kind of in play in our industry right now, and you kind of touched on the 50-50, 90-10. I think the key detail is how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
And so one thing we're seeing is, we have a lot of applications we've developed or things we deployed kind of in our environment. And we have things we've procured, whether it's from a vendor, things we've purchased, and trying to chart the course from where we are today in our current environment. I'll call that private cloud, out to the future. It's going to vary depending on what you're kind of looking at. So really taking a hard look at what you have and trying to figure out the best course for those different applications is a key piece.
Yeah.
And some of those things, the vendor probably is going to chart a course for those products. Essentially, you say you're using Office 365.
Yeah.
I bet you before that you had a tremendous amount of resources within your own private cloud, the VMware, dedicated to running Exchange.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Exactly.
And you could have taken all that and probably moved it out to the public cloud and invested a tremendous amount of time in doing that. But at the same time, the vendor is already charting that course for that platform.
Yep.
And that's something you can leverage. Where at the same time, there's other applications where that may not be the case, where you have to figure out how to chart the course to get those things out to the cloud. And it'll vary on your application. For us, you could do it one of two ways. You can take those existing things, tear them apart, build them back up, and kind of like we touched on earlier, you can build them to be cloud native and take advantage of the properties of the public cloud that make it so compelling. Or you can do what we kind of did, which is look at maybe there's an easier way to do this. That's one thing at MIT. We always try to raise the bar in terms of engineering and say, is there a better way we can solve this problem? And we have a tremendous investment in VMware in terms of most of our environment is virtualized, probably 98, 99%, and running on top of a VMware environment. Can you guys, with the work you guys have and done and built these tremendous virtualization technologies, can you help us carve a path from where we are to get to the cloud that's perhaps a bit easier, leveraging all the investments we have, and make that a simpler transition than having to rebuild every application from scratch?
And that's, I think, referred to here where you said we need to break down into those we want to refactor, because the business value is worth the refactoring, and those where we want to take a lift and shift approach, and how cloud-like can we get that capability for the least amount of effort, right? How many of those problems can we solve? Yeah, excellent. So, and then I think that basically why don't you talk a bit about that? Because obviously that capability, this idea that you can kind of just slide workloads in, out of clouds, between clouds, that's kind of a big, tall order. For anyone not technical, that sounds a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
That's how it should work, right? That's what we expect. Yeah, I think we've talked about it in terms of refactor versus lift and shift. I have to give credit to my colleague Dave Laporte, who kind of coined that term as we were kind of going through this journey. And the lift and shift approach is kind of, it should be as easy as drag and drop, point and click to move that resource out to potentially the cloud itself. That's kind of the vision we started out with, and saying, can we make this as easy as drag and drop or point and click? But as you kind of touched on, there's probably a lot that goes on behind the scenes to make that possible. And so we kind of started out with a vision about that's what we want to kind of get towards. And talking to some of the very bright and intelligent folks out at VMware, and said, what do you think? Is this something we could actually do? And they said, that's a really interesting question. Can't probably do it yet, but it's something we'd love to talk further with you about. And really started a journey for us in terms of a partnership over the last couple of years, where we've had the opportunity to kind of work side by side to make that vision kind of a reality. And it's been an incredible journey, for us to actually see, the synthesis of this, in the last couple months, where you can actually, take your virtual server, your virtual workload, point and click at it, and have it migrate out to the cloud without any downtime. And to me, and to any person who's a technologist, I think for all of us, the first time we deployed virtualization in our data center environments, the first time you were able to vMotion that server from one physical box to the other, and it just keeps working, that was magic. I mean, for us as technical folks, it's truly magical. And, now we take it for granted, right? We figure that out, it's all sorted out. That's kind of our expectation. To see that actually happen at cloud scale, to take something from within our environment in Boston or Cambridge, Massachusetts, and move it out to California, or move it out to New Jersey, with the same simple point-and-click type activity, it's truly magical. And it's due credit to the work, the fine work our teams have done together, and it's, that's been really incredible. It also positions us to do some really interesting things. The cloud itself, whether you're using Amazon or you're using Google or you're using Microsoft Azure, there's a tremendous number of differences between all those different platforms. And it's really hard to say you're going to become incredibly proficient in all of them. And one of the nice things, I think, in terms of looking at the future, is you can start to envision potentially a virtualization layer over the cloud itself, where a lot of the complexity or difficulties or having consistent security policies or network transparency are things that can be delivered through the software stack that VMware's kind of been working on putting together, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's very good. So you found this capability, and then I think we have, went a bit too much. So we've got a little timeline of kind of your progress there.
Yep.
So just want to quickly bring us up to speed on how that move has gone, and I think I want to, after that, maybe go back to, okay, so that's great. We've delved into technology deliberately because we had to explain what was possible.
Yep.
And what you've done. But then maybe if you can talk us through where you are, and then what would be really good is if you could link that back to those pain points we listed at the start, because that was the point. That's why you started looking at all these clouds, and tell us what has that meant and how has it reshaped the view of those challenges you were having and what you want to do about them and where you go from there.
Yeah, I mean, we have an environment of about 2,600 virtual workloads, and I'm proud to report that at this point we've migrated about 60% of our environments out to the vCloud Air environment right now. And that's been, honestly, it's been a fairly smooth and seamless process for us, which has been tremendous. Kind of as we touched on earlier, we have very high expectations about how well IT should run. And to our user community, it's been actually invisible, which has been absolutely tremendous, and it's probably not something we anticipated. We hope to have the majority of everything probably moved over from a virtual workload perspective probably within the next 12 months, which would be pretty exciting. The journey itself, in terms of the things we've learned kind of along the way, it really forced our organization in terms of different aspects of the IT infrastructure environment, whether it's our storage folks or our server folks or our networking folks or our database folks. This whole effort's really forced them to probably work more closely together in terms of, the boundaries used to be so clear about who's responsible for which different parts of things. In these kinds of cloud models you're headed to, there really are no boundaries, or the boundaries are very opaque and it's just a lot of gray. And one of the things that's been incredible for us is just to really see our team come together. We have some incredible staff, and we're incredibly fortunate to have some really talented folks, but to see them all come together, working across different disciplines, to really make this journey
so were they worried about it when you started? Was it like, but I'm the networking guru, you can't take my stuff, what will I do? Were they worried about it, and then how do they feel about it now?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to sit here and tell you that no one ever worried about it, but that wouldn't be true, right? I mean, that's, I think when we started, there is significant anxiety because the very nature of how people do things is changing. And I think, in IT, we're constantly faced with dealing with change. If you don't like change, IT is not an industry to be in. And for our staff, I think for everybody, there's a level of control and comfort they have of what they do today. that this whole era we're in is disrupting. And I think for each of them, they went into it with a level of trepidation or concern. And, that's something that, what does this mean for me? What happens when we're done? And one of our staff came up to me in a hallway, probably halfway through this. And she said, this has been one of the most incredible things that I've been able to work on in the last 20 years. She goes, this has really been awesome. And, I was really touched. I mean, that's a good thing. She goes, at the same time, I realize now that when we're done, the stuff I've been doing the last 20 years is probably going away. And she goes, I don't know what that means, but I'm okay with that. And, I was actually really surprised to see someone say that. And she said, because even when it's out in the cloud, I'm still doing things. There's still problems to solve. There's still troubleshooting. There's still all sorts of different things to do. It's just different things. And so for all our staff, I think they went into it with a tremendous amount of anxiety in terms of what does this mean for us? It means that you'll have opportunities to solve different problems. But as we know, the problems and challenges are always there. And so for them, I think they did go into it a little bit apprehensive. But I'm pretty excited to say that they've really embraced it.
So that's really interesting when we go back to the concept of the hamster wheel. So we're spending all that time and effort. We've got great people doing things. And they reaffirm that because they know they're delivering value. And actually, they're quite comfortable with firefighting. And actually, it's, well, I'm busy, I'm doing a great job. That's probably quite, we wouldn't like to admit it, but it's probably quite comfortable. But then when you actually change that paradigm and everyone starts moving further up the stack, you break that comfort and there are new things to be doing, and those same skills and values apply, but just in a very different way.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's always about problem solving. At MIT, we take great pride, and our ethos is really about hopefully creating the world's best problem solvers. And our IT environment and staff embody that as well. Culturally, that's what MIT's about. And yeah, I'd say absolutely, they kind of have different problems to work on. Maybe they're on a different hamster wheel. Hopefully it's smaller. I don't know yet. That's about the continuous generational change, right? We'll continue this journey. But I think for them, they're really finding different ways to impact the university in positive ways, helping support our faculty, helping support our students better, really helping drive an innovation engine that we have with this creative community, and hopefully reducing the time from idea to actualization and really allowing that creative spirit at MIT to take hold.
And so final one for me, I guess, what that story talks about so well, and congratulations, by the way, you did lead the way. What that story talks about is the part I was talking about, that getting that 90% to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. We've heard how it's kind of freed up resources, it's starting to innovate. But I just want to be really clear again. So that doesn't make it your cloud story is VMware, right? But freeing those resources up, enabling that capability, getting the headaches out of the way, you're now far more well positioned to be exploring the best use cases for AWS and Azure and Google, et cetera, right? Is that definitely something you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think your portfolio you touched on is going to be made up of a variety of different technologies. I think to get them out of that 80–90% of their time is being spent on just keeping the lights on and keeping things running. It's actually freed them up to really start to tackle interesting more problems, the infrastructure of the future, how do we build these things, and really trying to potentially move into cloud agnostic models, where we interact with a variety of different clouds, don't need to really know the bits of the particulars underneath, and that's kind of the things they're focusing on higher up the stack, higher areas of value hopefully, and new and more exciting opportunities.
That's fantastic, and I know you're here for a few more hours.
Yep.
By the coffee area, there's the VMware stand. Mark will be around for a few hours as well. So I'm sure we had some good dinner conversations last night. And
from what I remember, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure you may well have more questions for him then. So we're around to talk as well. But,
okay, right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.